depression is a choice, not necessarily a result of a chemical imbalance. Now let that sink in for a minute. So it's not a choice like when you're going in to order a latte. Rather, it is an unconscious creative solution that your mind comes up with to solve for impossible life situations that a person may come across. So how is it possible? Well, humans, we are some of the most creative individuals anywhere. If you look at it, we have been able to master and conquer and live anywhere on the world. We've been able to go to the moon. We've been able to explore the deepest seas. It's through our unbelievable creativity that we generate random choices in order to meet our needs. And it's through this ability to generate these creative choices that we can solve some amazing dilemmas that come up in our lives, either individually or within a community. You know, think about the Wright brothers. It was through their imagination and their relentless creativity and trial and error that they were able to figure out how to fly when everybody kept telling them it wasn't possible. Or watch a baby who has needs to get a toy or to get your attention, and the amount of creativity and randomness that they will generate to solve and meet their needs. Or probably the last time you went into a hotel room and you were trying to figure out how to turn on the lights or make the TV work. You know, you're walking in there and you start randomly pushing buttons and figuring things out. It's this creativity to come up with solutions where there are no clear answers that allows us to solve for things. And it is also part of our mind's creativity that will generate depression as a solution to really difficult decisions or situations that may appear in our life. So life is incredibly complex with very difficult situations where oftentimes there may not be a clear win. Many of these are existential in nature that have to do with the meaning of life or trying to address the purposelessness of life and finding purpose and meaning. Another common existential issue is the reality of our own death and what this means about limits to do-overs that we don't have forever, and the more we become aware of this often in our midlife, we face new situations. And lastly, it's the fear of being alone. Everybody, to a certain extent, is living in denial of their fear of being alone. And this is what will keep us in bad relationships, in bad jobs. It's the fear of being alone. And these existential issues in which there's not a clear win present huge dilemmas for us. And human beings, we are motivated by wins. We need something to move towards. We need a win. And when we can't find a win, we start doing loss management. We'll try and motivate ourselves by scaring ourselves. A common example is in the case of a marriage. Somebody who no longer wants to be married, but they don't want a divorce. This presents a huge dilemma. And you will see people scaring them of all the bad things that will happen to them if they end the marriage. You know, you'll never meet somebody again. You'll be alone. You'll be financially ruined. It will be terrible for the kids. You'll do horrible things. And people get stuck because nobody's able to tell them what the win is for staying in the marriage. And when we can't motivate ourselves to find a win, when we can't scare ourselves into doing something, depression can be a creative solution to a really difficult situation. So what's the setup for depression? Well, one of them is regret. Regret is a decision that we make at one point in our life. An earlier version of ourselves, our 2015 version of ourselves, makes a decision that today our 2017 version is paying the consequences for. So it's a decision that's locked in the past that has negative consequences in the future and that we can't change. And many times people will be obsessed with if only they would have done something different. And so regret is a common setup for potential for depression. Another one is poor human relationships. Human beings, we are very social animals. It is through the power of our relationships and the communities that we form that are both healing. Think about it, we form friendships, we get married, we have families, we have larger communities. It's our strength in forming relationships that is healing. Think about the last time when you were feeling really sad. What was the most healing thing you experienced? It was talking to somebody who cared about you and understood you, and you felt understood. That feels powerful. Or when you've gone on a romantic date and you feel connected and you feel special. These human relationships are powerful. And when we have poor relationships, this can be a setup for depression. And in another case is a situation, again, as I mentioned earlier, where we cannot find a win. Classic examples are, I don't want to be married, but I don't want a divorce. I'm being asked to move to a new location, which I don't want to go because they'll leave my friends, but if I don't go, they'll fire me. So a lot of times life gives us very difficult situations, and some of these existential issues that can be a setup for depression are things like childbirth. Childbirth is a massive transformation in terms of which people are having to deal with massive changes in their personal freedom, getting a brand new identity of becoming a parent, and at the same time losing an old identity. Another one is the loss of job. Losing a job targets our purpose and meaning. It addresses our sense of security, and it is a very difficult and scary time when somebody loses their job. Another one is the marriage failing, or any significant relationship ending. This is really tackling our fear of being alone, our connectedness to another person, and makes us aware of our mortality and how vulnerable we can be when we don't have our community. Major illness, the loss of the functioning of your body, or aging, in which we can no longer move or do the things that we used to do. This again targets these existential issues around mortality, our freedom, and our ability to take care of ourselves. And another big one is death. Death is unwanted change. When we lose somebody, it is powerful. This person's absence is felt, and again, it makes us aware of our own mortality. So any one of these existential situations presents huge life dilemmas in which there are not easy choices to figure out how to move forward, how to make things better. And these can be real setups for depression. So you might wonder, well, how is depression a creative solution? Again, it's a solution in which we're trying our mind, when it is unconsciously solving for problems and wants us to keep us alive and wants to protect us, we'll use it in a creative, unconscious way. And one of the common ways that depression can be used is a way to indirectly ask for help. Asking for help is one of the most difficult things many people face, right next to public speaking. Because when you ask for help, many people perceive that they are weak, or that they're incompetent, or they should know better. And so asking directly for help is filled with shame and embarrassment. And so a common way people may ask for help, one example is a marriage ending. And the partner, let's say the husband, decides he really is done with the marriage, he wants to leave. And the wife doesn't want this, and she's devastated. She's financially afraid. She's afraid of being alone. She is afraid of her loss of social status. And no matter what begging and pleading and attempts to save the marriage, the husband won't listen. And she goes into depression, deep depression, where she can't eat, she's losing weight, she's sleeping. And unconsciously, people around her start to respond differently to her, and including the departing husband, who initially comes to her, concerned about her, and will give her attention. So in the short term, depression worked. It got her what she wanted, this person's attention. But in an unconscious way, it doesn't solve the bigger issue that it won't save the marriage. So here's a situation where depression in a creative way gets somebody unconsciously what they want. Again, another example is when there's no clear choice or no clear win. Again, I deal a lot with relationships. So in a marriage, I don't want to end the marriage. I don't want what goes with this marriage. I can't figure out a way to save it, but I really don't want a divorce. I don't want the social stigma, the financial ramifications. I cannot find a win. So depression at an unconscious level stops me. You shut down, you immobilize. It allows you to not choose. It allows you to choose the status quo and endure. Although it is a short-term solution with heavy-duty price tags, it is a person's creative solution. It's their best attempt in that moment to solve for a situation where they can't find. Depression can also be a way to control another person's behavior. Or it can be a response to controlling behavior. When somebody is constantly angering and they're abusive and critical, people will depress, they'll shut down. And unconsciously, the behavior of "you're hurting me, can't you see this, stop, stop," the depression sends out a message. Often it gets lost and people ignore it, but it's a person's best attempt. Another one is a response to try and show somebody that you need to change because your behavior, I can't live with it. A common example is where somebody will choose to date somebody who is a smoker and they're a non-smoker. And they both collude on the idea that the smoker will give up smoking once they get married. And then they get married, and the smoker continues to smoke. And the person then gets angry and frustrated, and they start to depress, showing them, your smoking hurts me. I'm so unhappy. Can't you change this? And of course, it gets the person's attention, but it doesn't solve the problem. It creates other problems. So again, depression is a reaction or a creative, unconscious solution to solve for really difficult situations where there's no clear win. And the last one is, it is an address, it's a way to manage and protect the body against murderous rage, or when people are suicidal, or they want to act out, they're so angry. When we become so angry and suicidal where we lose hope, depression shuts us down, it immobilizes us, and it actually protects us from killing ourselves. And in fact, people who are suicidal, the most dangerous time is when they're just coming out of their depression and they're able to act on their suicidal ideation. So again, depression has a unique way of helping people cope with difficult life situations. There's the DSM model, or the medical model towards depression. There it is. The medical model views depression as something that is coming outside of you. You often hear this talk about chemical imbalance, that there's something broken or impaired, and you got to fix it or replace the part. It's external. And the medical model views it as you treat it with medicine, you treat depression with drugs. And this isn't actually quite true. If you go and search, there are actually no clinical studies that validate this chemical imbalance. It's sort of a hypothesis to explain how drugs work. And while drugs do help people, it's not the total story. Because if you would actually go into your doctor and say, can I have a blood test to see if I'm chemically imbalanced, there's none that exists. It's more of a hypothesis. Now the holistic model, we are looking at depression as a creative choice. Not necessarily a conscious choice, and this isn't to minimize the seriousness of depression, especially when it's ongoing and chronic, but rather it's the person's best attempt to solve for an immediate need or a problem in that moment with the tools and mental health skills and life skills that they have at that time. And behavior is a total, or depression is a total behavior. When you do scans, there's nothing actually physically wrong with the brain. The brain may be firing off differently, but it does impair our thinking, it impairs our behavior, it impairs our feelings, and it impairs our physiology. So it is a total encompassing behavior or action. And depression definitely affects relationships. So from a holistic model, we are looking at treating it through relationships, by connecting with people. In fact, sometimes when people come into my office, they're so depressed. The only thing I can do is try and connect with them and form a relationship. And this is often healing. It's the beginning to healing, in which we can start to now help people find choices and see their situation differently. Because we always have choices. And it's by empowering people that they can heal and get better, even when they feel like there are no real win-win choices. So it's sort of people instead of pills. Although we sometimes may need both, people are both the cure and the cause to and about depression. Because we are such social creatures, we do need to learn to live with people. But at the same time, it's really hard to live with people, because the number one thing I get coming into my office is people are always asking me, how can I change my spouse? How can I change my mother-in-law? How can I change my partner? Everybody wants to look at ways to change somebody else. And so this is really difficult because we can't change other people. Nothing causes somebody to do something. People are decision-making. We see information in our world, and we'll generate random choices to solve for or address the current situation. So part of what learning to live with other people requires is acceptance, both of yourself and who you are, and of other people. Again, if you're gonna date a smoker and marry a smoker, you better understand that that's a very serious addiction, and they may not be able to give it up. And so it's really understanding what you're signing up for or what you're choosing. And so we really need to learn how to assess what we want and make sure what we want is realistic, and what we want is we're going to be willing to do what's required to get it. So sometimes depression can come about when we're not realistic in assessing our situation or accepting things as they are. Another thing is to really learn how to control ourselves. Again, so many people are looking at ways to try and control another person or change another person. And this is really difficult, because while we love people, we have a child, or we have our parents, or we have an in-law that we have to be with, There's certain beliefs or behaviors that may make it really difficult for us to get along with them or be around them. And this presents challenges, so the more we can learn to accept others and internally just make our choices rather than trying to force others, this improves relationships, and self-acceptance and acceptance within a community is very empowering. And lastly is understanding the difference between happiness and pleasure. Happiness is actually quite effortful, and no one thing makes you happy. Happiness is about meaning that we give to things in our life. And many times people confuse happiness with pleasure. Pleasure is external. It is short-term. We often buy it and we don't want to share it. Whereas happiness is something we share, but you have to generate it yourself. And Dr. William Glasser, who was the founder of choice psychology and choice theory, had a really great definition of happiness, which is happiness or mental health is enjoying the life you are choosing to live, getting along with people near and dear to you, doing something with your life you believe is worthwhile, and not doing anything to deprive any other human being of this opportunity to pursue happiness. So the more we can learn to live together, the happier we'll be. So again, treatment for depression, really it's about improving relationships, and this is no easy task. Learning how to live with others who don't necessarily think the way you think or believe the way you believe, and learning how to internally control yourself. So one of the biggest things I'm helping people to do is help them shift from and becoming aware of choices that they actually have. And sometimes their choices are not a doing thing, but are a reframing thing. And shifting from, moving from have to I want to. Because if you think about it, when you have to do something, what's the attitude that you bring? I have to do this, I have to go to school, I have to watch my kids. It's putting a loaded gun to your head, and the energy that you bring is bad, it's effortful, versus learning how to do I want to. The next one is really understanding the acceptance. Acceptance is about not giving in or giving up. It's about coming to terms with what is. And based on what is, who you are, your situation, whether it's economic, financial, religious, racial, making decisions within that. And lastly, it's addressing regret. You get new choices. So the next time you want to choose depression, consider if it's really the bad choice, or if there's a significant relationship you may look to improve, or if there's some new choice that you may not have seen that you could have. And lastly, it's so important to reach out and get help. Thanks.